15, 14. Okay. So I have recently been considering, especially for Christmas, I thought maybe I could buy it for myself as a stocking stuffer, to buy a uh, MAGA hat. MAGA, is that how people pronounce it? So I've always pronounced it MAGA because I did Krav Maga. So I was like, it's kind of like more like a Ma, but it's make America. So it must be Ma. But people say MAGA. That actually doesn't make any sense. This is like a GIF kind of conversation. But I've been thinking about buying a Make America Great hat or visor or something because I realize it might be the most punk rock piece of clothing that anyone could buy in modern culture.
Hmm.
And I was thinking the reason I bring that up is because I think it would be hilarious. It's like the first time I ever saw that was the Bad Religion logo is like the upside down cross thing with like isn't there like a no through it or whatever? So it's like no to like, anti-religion sort of like thing. And you're like, it's meant to be provocative, right? It's like, and at some point, obviously, like, as somebody who like loves the cross, you're like, oh, I see it. And it kind of triggers me. But I was like, I think that's what punk rock is for, is literally to go, what do you, God save the queen, kind of thing. And so,
disturb the comfortable.
yeah, you gotta discomfort. Yeah, exactly. Anyone comfortable must be privileged. So they must be discomfited. Anyway, in thinking about that, I was like, that I think was one of the impetuses for why I was like, why I wanted to have today's discussion. Because I was like, just like for a while, although I think they stopped doing it in the past like week or so, because I think it's illegal according to the Hatch Act, which is hilarious. But for a while, people were saying like MAGA Republicans and then they would just say MAGA as like sort of a catch-all acronym for some sort of thing that they probably couldn't define, and I probably couldn't define, and no one could. I mean, we could define it. We took a long time about it, but we were never going to. Likewise, I kept seeing the almost acronym parade of things that are like the MAGA for, I guess, what I would just term as like modern liberals. Of like they look over at the progressives and go, like, look at all this craziness they're up to. So their MAGA is like CRT, DEI, and even sometimes RJ. SEL, and then RJ. Although I've seen RJ acronym the least, but I was like, I feel like it's just one of those things in the acronym parade of people to just castigate things they don't quite understand, is my assumption. I'm assuming most of the time people castigate on an acronym basis. They just don't know what they're talking about on either side of the spectrum. But you know a ton about RJ. And so that's why today's question on Totally Classic is RJ, is restorative justice justice? And I have with me, I'm Brendan McNamara, but over there, right there, is Andy Swindler. And Andy Swindler, at least in my life, you are the closest thing I have, Andy, to a full-on RJ expert. I know that's a heavy duty, but it literally just means you're the person I would think who I know most about this. That's a lot of pressure.
And as we know from former episodes, I, Andy Swindler, am also a relativist. So being an expert is relative, I guess.
It absolutely, well, it always is. It is. That's a completely true thing. It could be about accreditation, but I feel like that's actually a pretty impoverished means to determine what an expert is. I think an expert would be, I mean, you could determine it somewhat objectively in terms of like published citations, that sort of thing. But overall, I think it tends to be not who says the thing the most or references it the most, but the person who you see engaging in it. And you are a person who I think I've heard not only use the phrase, but that you participate in workshops with it. You participate in the community, in the actual execution of what restorative justice is. Oh my gosh, Andy right now is holding up a certificate of recognition, having been awarded this day, the 30th of November, 2023, an excellency, it has a little excellency badge on it too. I don't know if everyone got one of those, just you, Andy Swindler. You've completed a 4-day restorative justice training. So we're really just a couple of weeks out of that. And this is not your first, of course, crossing the Rubicon into the wildlands of that which is restorative justice. But first, Andy, we got to define it, because I think for a naive person, my initial, and I'm gonna express my skeptical naivete, was my immediate assumption was it was something like mutual aid, where I feel like it's more or less a rebranded with like a new mission statement, but it's pretty much a rebranded charity. It's just what we would call charity for thousands of years. So likewise with restorative justice, I was like, so wait, this is just justice, but we're going to highlight aspects of it that we feel like have been like underlooked or whatever. And so it's a rebrand because the former form just didn't quite, you like didn't want all the hangups, all the hangups of just the term previously.
Yeah, and in the spirit of our question, and I think many of us in this sort of communities are holding the question, like, is what we often refer to justice, like I sometimes get tangled up referring to like the justice system because I'm like, oh, I don't think it's
Mm-hmm.
very just. So now
Yeah.
I might say the legal system or something that's a little
Oh,
more
sure. Yeah.
just accurate. It's like I don't want to give it that much credit. So here we are to decide, is restorative justice worthy of the title of justice? Hopefully we'll explore a bit of what the heck is justice even.
Right. I know that would be key.
So I'm gonna go. So that lovely certificate. And no, I think everybody got the same one. We were all
Okay.
excellent.
Oh, congrats. So excellency in this case was not relative.
We were
Mm.
excellent compared to everybody who didn't bother to
Who
show up.
didn't do it? Yeah, exactly. Didn't even sign up. Yeah.
Um, it was from Build Chicago, which
Okay.
the story there is actually a pretty interesting way to talk about the courts in Chicago, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So the Build Chicago has been around for, I think, decades. But just in the last year, I mean, it opened, I think, in February, so less than a year ago, had a major multi-million dollar expansion of their facility, and it's this beautiful community center in the west side of Chicago, in a very economically disadvantaged area, the Austin neighborhood, and it's unbelievable. I mean, it's like huge, gym and track and uh, like spaces for mental health and a recording studio and an art studio and a 3D printing lab, and I mean, it's just like
Oh, yeah.
super state of the art. And one of the this is coming to me in this moment. I'm friends with a couple folks over there, and one of them was saying, they were doing a lot of research in the community, and one of the reasons kids were like stealing was to get money to pay for studio time. It's like mostly what they
Jeez.
really
Yeah.
to do was make music, and this was their path. So this was one answer. I was like, well, let's build
Yeah.
a studio.
Yeah.
That's so somewhere in here is this theme I know that's come up for us before of, how does building community and providing resources, especially for things like creativity, which you and I have had tremendous access to in our lives, um, potentially reduce crime or
Hmm.
other, behaviors that are gonna, when they meet our current legal system, or especially are gonna really, cause people to have all kinds of trouble in their life and break up communities.
Hmm.
And so what happened was there's three community restorative justice courts in
Okay.
Chicago. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, what that means. But this neighborhood was set to get one of these courts, and they didn't get it.
Mm.
Interestingly enough, the neighborhood I used to live in on the northwest side of Chicago, Avondale, got that court. And so Build reacted and said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to build our own peace and justice center. It
Okay.
doesn't have to be legally attached to a court. And arguably, I think that's the way it should be,
Yeah.
community centers, right? And maybe there's a thread in here about the state of churches. I feel like churches used still are in many cases, but I think with the general sort of diminishment or reduced, I don't know, economic viability or what, I don't know. I'm just, that's maybe a strange way to put it, but church is a business like anything else, and
Yeah.
there's lots of churches around here that have been converted into all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah.
So um so there's that question I'm holding is like, well, what is the community center moving forward, is some thread in here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in this case, this obviously a major investment. They don't all have to be multi-million dollar facilities,
Sure.
but in this case they said, let's build a peace and justice center, and let's put restorative justice and circle practice at the center of it. And it's really extraordinary. And it's led by my friend and mentor Edwina Hamilton, who led this training along with a colleague of hers. So I'm gonna reference a few things from that training just because it's fresh and because, hey,
Yeah.
why not? Why not go with, I've got this piece of paper that literally says, what is restorative justice?
Hey, there we go. That's exactly what I was looking for.
So wait, not, oh, you weren't looking for the 5-minute monologue.
No, no, no. I just mean like it would be nice to when people started using the phrase initially, I was just like, I don't know what you're talking about. Because as far as I know my awareness of what justice is most like even biblically speaking, right? Because I'm a Bible dude, is an eye for an eye, for example.
Yeah.
Eye for eye, tooth for tooth is restorative justice. The entire intention of all justice is restoration, either for specifically for the perpetrator, because really uh, uh, yeah, I mean the victim is centered in terms of like nothing would happen if there wasn't a victim. There'd be really no cause to even have any of these conversations unless someone had been victimized by someone else. But essentially so much of it is like on therefore the perpetrator of whatever the crime, the transgression, the harm is, and it's all about restoration. Even if the crime, in the biblically speaking, I mean that goes from rape all the way down to murder, rape, all the way down to having like dry patches of skin. And the whole thing is restoring the person so that they can not only fundamentally be part of the community, but speaking of churches, that they can come to the temple again. So they can be restored in right relationship to community and God. So the love of God, love of neighbor thing. So to me, like justice in and of itself, as it is practiced purely, has to be restorative, at least for somebody.
Well, so
somebody has to be restored.
That's a great like interlude in the sense that the way most of our legal system works in America, and I think even potentially what you're describing, like eye for an eye, would be called punitive justice.
Oh, interesting.
And so I think let's hold this question, like, is it really restorative? Most of the argument here is that, if somebody's harmed and say it's, I don't know, say it's just like petty theft or something, like somebody steals a purse, and I'm not diminishing that. I mean, that could be violent. And it's certainly a pain in the ass.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great one because it's right in the I feel like it's in the middle.
It's in the middle, right? It's like, okay. Let's assume it wasn't violent. It was just like somebody was very startled and had to cancel all their credit cards. So, is eye for an eye in that case, like the thief then gets their purse stolen?
Oh, right. Yeah. Just anything that they've stolen, whether or not they have to return it or not, biblically speaking, everything that they stole, like if they did it with cattle in the Bible, like someone stole 4 cattle, even once the cattle are returned, they owe the person they stole 4 cattle from 4 cattle.
I see.
And then they're restored. Same thing, eye for an eye. If you literally hurt someone, you take their eye out, we take your eye out, and then we're done. Like it's meant to basically stave off the acceleration of revenge, like we see in Gaza, for example, right? It's you did this. Okay, we're gonna do this. Okay, we're gonna do this, and it's always accelerative tendency. Like, you know what I mean? That's the whole point of like justice as a system, right? In that case, we're all talking about systems. So then it would be whatever so if you stole someone's purse, whatever I would say, what I would do in that biblical model to restore you is you would assess all the contents of the purse, and it would be great to involve the victim, right? What does this mean to you emotionally? What is this? And then ultimately those things, whoever the person who stole it is, whatever their equivalent in their life, even if they don't have it now, then eventually once they're done. And then at that point, just like how it should be in our society, but it isn't. And this is why I understand wanting to rebrand. Once you've served your time, or you've essentially paid your debt back to the person, especially specifically the person you've harmed. That's why I don't like you pay the state $10,000 when you harmed a person. You're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? No, the person you hurt. You know what I mean, or whatever. So if you stole all the contents of that purse could be tallied emotionally and objectively, and the person who stole it would have to not only return their purse and everything in it, all that they would then have to recompense that which they stole.
Yeah, and that's, I think, compatible with this, especially because you open some analysis and processing of the emotional harm, and that
it's both,
that's something I don't think we see in our legal systems typically, like, because that's I think harder the way we've constructed our laws and just the nature of it. Just there's not space for it, and so a lot of the argument here is a geometric one. Like the
Yes. Yeah.
circle is a space to come together, and I can talk even later about the restorative justice courts and sort of how they're structured,
Yeah.
and where you're not like looking up at a judge, and there's some different pieces. But let me read this
Yeah.
definition real
Yeah.
quick to give
Yep.
us some grounding. This is from Build Chicago, which I'm sure has drawn from a number of other resources, but that's where I'm received this specific definition.
Mm.
Origins in indigenous culture. Let's assume American Indian indigenous culture, where the village came together to collectively address needs and celebrate life. It is a philosophy and a way of life that helps to promote healing and well-being within individuals and communities. In addressing woundedness, it helps to address the harm, both experienced and caused. It cultivates relationships while encouraging conversations that get at underlying issues that guide in defining unaddressed needs. And it helps to bridge gaps and close divides and separations.
Hmm. Well, that's funny because that would be pretty similar to our court system. And I wonder if in some ways it's volume, like what makes, but at the same time, it's both phenomenally like in almost every single way, our court system, but phenomenally unlike as well. I mean, that's the jury of your peers. You're in a room, you're slowing everything down. I mean, honestly, like the pettiest court cases can still take 8 days of deliberation where you're returning again and again. It's also open to the public, so then literally anyone can come, and then like, you know what I mean. But I often wonder, this is I don't know, we'll get at it, but as we were talking about it, since we started sort of talking about subjectivism, it's and I believe in the devaluing of subjectivism. Like, I think it's less relevant than objective reality, but I don't think it should be absent altogether. And I don't think it is from our justice system. But by the time we start talking about it, most of the time, most of what we've proves, quote unquote, harm has to be objective, right? So someone like feeling like someone did something, but that's also in there too. Like I've had this with my mom or whatever. My mom was attacked by a larger man, and the police came, and the first questions they asked was like, were you afraid for your life? And whether she was like kind of afraid for her life was whether they took the person who literally physically assaulted her, whether they arrested that person. So I mean, in some ways, at the time I was just like, it made me want to throw subjectivism out. I was like, who cares? Then that just means anybody who's not afraid of people, that means literally someone could have a gun in my mouth. And I don't want to live in a place of fear. So I could be like, no, they had a gun in my mouth. They cocked the thing back. They kept shoving it in like they were trying to make me give a blowjob to the gun. And if I'm at peace with God, then I'm not afraid of that person. You know what I mean? Like, why would I let them make me afraid? Like, that sounds insane to me. But then that means the cop could be like, well, okay, then you weren't afraid for your life.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's an interesting piece that I could immediately see where our justice system kind of has a very weird, I would just say a weird relationship. It's not that it's absent, but it's very strange.
Yeah. And I want to weave into, just for structure and again, in the context of this training, which by the way, there's this 4-day restorative justice training format. It's in person. And I feel, at least in Chicago, it feels kind of like a rite of passage. Like I've been involved with the community for many years. Interestingly enough, a lot of my initial sort of formal interaction with restorative justice was when the neighboring suburb of Oak Park, where I now live,
Yeah.
because the Oak Park Library has had an annual conference.
Mm.
And this teases out the language thing a little, because it used to be called Restorative Justice Conference. Now it's being called a Restorative Practices Conference. So
Oh,
there's like a distinction
no.
between.
Yeah. You got to slow. I mean, let me just say this to all your progressive friends, Andy. Y'all got to slow down. By the time y'all have moved on, I feel like 90% of the human population still doesn't know what you're talking about the first time. So slow. Oh, and listen, I've been told by people who live in Chicago that Oak Park is like the most progressive, like zip code or whatever in the entire city. So I just got to tell y'all, you got to slow down. Slow
Okay.
down. Stop changing the acronym. If you're in a bunch of groups, man, just let them know. Don't change it yet. No one else is sick of it. We don't know what you're talking about. But they're like, people in Oak Park have like already talked about this like 97 times, in a month or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And I'm too online, man, and I still don't. I'm literally learning right now what the heck restorative justice means.
Like, why are you talking about old shit? And you're like, it's not
Yeah,
old shit.
yeah, exactly. That's not how we speak about it anymore. I'm like, no. I'm sorry, but your princess is in another castle.
That's that's offensive now. That was 18 months ago. That's how we use that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Well, I
So
appreciate the
okay,
PSA. I'll pass that along, and
just let
maybe
him know.
maybe that's part of our service to the world. Is we'll be like a feedback loop, and
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you
That
you sort of tell me where the language most people are still using, and I'll be out here trying to hold the train back.
yeah.
Um,
Just wait, guys. Just wait. Let's let everyone catch up first.
well, so this I feel like this 4-day training is like kind of a rite of passage. I mean, I've had all
Mm.
any number of different circle trainings and sat in circles and even launched a network of space holders and all sorts of stuff, but I had never carved out. That's a lot of time,
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah,
just
it is.
thankfully, and my wife Rachel joined it, and so
Oh,
it's
cool.
it's an extraordinary privilege to just take pretty much a full week and be in this training. And the cool thing is it's taught in a circle.
Hmm.
So even if I didn't learn anything
Oh,
new,
like a literal circle, by the way.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Like um
Oh, so it's in person.
it's in person.
Yeah,
And here
yeah, yeah.
I know we don't
I
really.
feel like it would have to. I mean, based on everything I've heard so far, it would have to be in person.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I know people can't see this, but I'm just showing Brendan a photo of the
yeah,
actual circle. There's a
yeah.
lot. This is after several days. Like we're layering in each day we come, and there's different exercises, and around the edge of the circle are all these different talking pieces, and that's a huge part of it is
Yeah.
just grabbing a talking piece and then passing that around, which I find to be tremendously useful as like an introvert, that
Oh,
I
yeah, yeah,
feel
yeah.
like I want to be invited to talk. Like it's harder,
Oh,
like
interesting. Yep.
it's way less likely for me to jump in. I mean, that was even true in college. I had professors, be like, "Why don't you
Yeah,
talk more?"
yeah, yeah.
Um, and it's just I would just kind of generally label it as introversion, and we could have a whole episode about the deeper meaning of those words, but that's
Yeah,
that's I
yeah,
think how most people relate to the energy I'm talking about
yeah.
in terms of language. Um, but it's really and it's interesting. I've mentioned a few times the book Sand Talk, written by an Aboriginal man in what we now call Australia, and he disses circle practice. He's
Yeah.
like, I mean, there are people out there who view this as a kind of appropriation,
Mm.
um, and so of course everything is controversial. Maybe that's what makes human life interesting. And
It does.
he's just like because in his world, like indigenous wisdom and is this crosstalk is just like. I've also heard this maybe true of like New York Jews, where it's just like, oh my God, no, like there's three people talking at once, and it's all
Yes.
just like
Yeah.
maybe like an honoring of the true chaos of life and nature,
Yeah.
which I also happen to agree with. I do believe that's like
Yeah. Oh, wait.
more
So
of like,
this
yeah,
particular circle practice was absent crosstalk because I've been in circles like that, and I can't. I agree with that dude, Santuck man. I can't stand like mostly because my natural instinct is like
yeah,
crosstalk, and it doesn't mean you interrupt and take over. It's not like you take the stick, but you can talk. You have to be able to respond, or else this is the same thing. I had trouble in school as a kid. I mean, not academically, but behaviorally, because I ask a lot of questions. Like that's how I learn. Like, and
right.
I'll get stuck like 7 sentences back if I'm still like, well, wait a second, is that true? Or what do you know? So it's so funny. But I've been in those circles. I don't know if it's that kind of circle, but where like someone talks at a time, and then
Yes,
okay,
that's what I mean
got it,
by the talking stick. So you pass this around,
got it.
and you can only speak with the stick. And I'm
Yeah,
sensitive to that as much as
yeah.
I'm recognizing that I am the beneficiary of this practice.
I think it's designed for to make sure people who do not readily share their voice share their voice.
Yeah, and there's a whole thing with agreements and values, and there's a lot of very careful and beautiful construction to the space, and I'm not going to go through all
Yeah,
of that, but
sure.
one of the agreements that's quite common is if you're somebody who speaks a lot, maybe take a step back, and if you're somebody who doesn't speak a lot, maybe take a step forward.
Yeah.
I like that, in a way.
Yes.
But I'm also sensitive to like how might this not be inclusive? In fact,
Sure.
you just revealed that. Like, how might you not feel included or at liberty to sort of engage in your natural way? And of course, I think we're both here having these conversations because we celebrate like learning differently and being exposed to
Yeah.
different ways of being and all of that.
Yeah.
But
Let's try it all. Yeah.
but anyway, so I'm holding that too. Like
Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, when and where is the place to do this? So the last thing I want to weave in terms of sort of this sort of formal training context are um, these different modes of these activities that fall under the umbrella of restorative justice. So
Okay.
conflict resolution,
Yep.
peer juries, which
Yep.
is,
Classic.
like
Yep.
you just mentioned, the courts do that in a certain way, arguably, but it's like less formal. Peacemaking, broad
Yep.
term, community service, transformative justice, World Cafe, which is a really cool format, community organizing, and then circles.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, circles are the core geometry and setting for restorative justice and really lots of things. But again, that's like I'm biased because I'm like I love circles because it's slow and I know I'm gonna get to talk and people will listen and all of that stuff. One of the interesting things that was said in this, in the terms of the language,
Yep.
is that they were correlating restorative justice and transformative justice and peacemaking, and basically saying these are all
Okay.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, there's lots of people that will argue that they're very different, especially
Sure.
between RJ and TJ, restorative justice and transformative justice. And I notice in that, I'm always just kind of sensitive to when does the human ego need for hierarchy emerge? It
Sure.
emerges absolutely everywhere. That's
Oh, of
probably
course.
the number
Yeah.
one theme of our entire conversations, right? It's just
Yeah. It's always there. Yeah.
like it's there. So then when I first heard it, it kind of felt like that. Like, well, so two things. Like one,
Yeah.
transformative
Yeah.
justice is quote unquote better. And then two, going
Mm.
back to what you were saying, like, oh, we got to keep moving. Like restorative justice isn't good enough or isn't enough.
Yeah.
And we need like a new, better next,
Yes.
3.0 version or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
You're
Which I also understand. I think it comes from a restlessness too, but and like a competitive whatever morality, which is also fine. But it's also like you can't, and of course this is the progressive instinct, right? Is to make progress. Whether I shouldn't even say that is to let's say this. The progressive instinct is to do something, which I love, and this is why I totally relate to you as a progressive or progressives generally. I was like, I relate to that instinct. Let's do something. Let's get something done. It's not always progress. Now, a progressive instinct can be regressive, meaning you keep modifying something that shouldn't be modified. Like literally, this is the good of like this is why you can almost put conservative opposite progressive because you're like we got to make progress. We got to go. We've got to keep trying. We've got to keep going. And other times people are like, wait a second. Let's hold on to the good stuff. We can't. You're literally throwing out. I mean, it's like when we try to clean up messes, like at your house, my house, whatever. We're both collectors, and you're like, hold on a second. Like progress, yeah, you can make fast progress if you literally just chuck everything out. High testosteronic, like let's just go. And then, but at the same time, you're like, well, no, we gotta that which is precious, let's maintain, and whatever. That is a striking balance, I think, inherent to all justice.
So this is a case of literally reinventing the wheel or the circle. Um,
Wait, and so restorative justice. Hold on, because I feel like we're doing the thing we always do, which is like make all the petals of the center of the flower and come back to the center over and over again. It's pretty much how we generally talk. But I don't want to miss out on. Okay, so we got some tenets of what restorative justice is. How does that differ, or how would it popularly be conceived as differing from, let's say, the as all those things applied systematically? How does that differ from our justice system, let's say in the West or even just the United States, because that's where we both live? Like, what would be the key
so let me
differences?
make a couple more comments about the language, and then
Yep.
let's go to the RJ community courts here in Chicago because I think that's a good way to illustrate it.
Okay.
So one of the things I liked about this, as I mentioned, is um, I was taught in this setting that restorative justice, transformative justice, and peacemaking are all more or less the same,
Okay.
which I happen to agree with because I think they all have the same basic goal, which is
Yeah.
to heal together, to build stronger communities, to build stronger relationships.
Like all that. Yeah.
That's basically, yeah. And I appreciate that about us with all of our differences and sort of how things play out or what we're attached to or how
Yeah.
it can be done. It's like I think we basically hold a similar vision. In fact, I think most people do.
I think most people would. Yeah.
Um,
I think most people would until they are a victim of crime. And then I think the lived experience of being
yes.
of what, and then all of a sudden you're like, I kind of don't care about those things anymore. It seems to listen, I haven't been a victim of crime very often. And honestly, I don't really take crime that poorly personally. But I've seen it happen to a lot of people. I would say I've seen it happen even more distinctly with women. I think because of the physical weakness of women makes them respond differently to harm. Just because it's threats are, or even really small men. It have sorry to throw small men in there with women, but I mean that truly. Like larger women, have less umbrage against offenses, and I feel like as do larger men, and I've seen very small men get real upset about stuff real fast, and I was like, oh, this just makes sense. They kind of have to put more aggressive energy. You don't have to, but it behooves you to put more aggressive energy out in the world, especially when you're being in any way victimized or even you're concerned about it. But yeah, I think those principles, I would hope those principles you just stated are semi-universal, at least in the context that we both live in.
Yeah. I mean, you often bring us back to statistics, which I appreciate, and I don't have the exact stats, but it's quite
No.
clear that most violent crime against other people is committed by men.
Yes. Well, yeah. Well, save, of course, what was that? Our fifth or sixth episode? Save, I would say, in the United States, that women are the number one perpetrators of homicide via abortion. So, but that is absented from our crime stats because it is not illegal to kill those particular people.
Right.
But again, that's it always goes right. Larger, larger against smaller.
Yeah.
Larger people victimize smaller people in all contexts.
Yeah. So, um, one thing I'll say about transformative justice, uh, is that to me, that's a lot about zooming out.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just think about the words, restorative justice is about restoring a relationship. So like you were saying
Yes.
earlier about whether it's um eye for an eye or however. I don't know that that's an exact match. That would be interesting to see, sort of keep tinkering with.
Yeah.
But this idea that we're restoring something that existed before.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a lot of the argument people make for transformative justice, especially in the context of like social inequities and systemic injustice and all those things,
Yeah.
um, that you may or may not believe in, uh, is the idea that these things need to be transformed. We don't want to
Mm-hmm.
we don't have anything to go back to, right?
Yeah.
Like if we didn't think it was fair or just or good before, we don't want to go back to that. So I think that's a
Yeah.
lot of what transformative.
Well,
Now,
that would be a big difference, I think. Yeah.
yeah, and so to me to me the way they correlate is they are connected. So I think
Mm-hmm.
restorative
Yeah.
justice
Yeah.
is a bit closer in, like how are we going to deal with this situation where in many cases there was a relationship. Maybe they
Sure.
were friends out of falling out or
Yeah.
people in the community or whatever.
Yeah.
And I also believe it's inherently transformative. Like you sit in circle with folks, you go deep, you reveal emotions, you're transforming something, you're healing something. So to me, it's like transformative justice is just like the zoom out. It's like, oh, well, if we're doing
Sure.
all these other practices, then and then people who really sort of are, I guess, focusing on that as a practice are going to look at systems and say, oh, what's
Mm-hmm.
wrong with this system? Why does this pattern keep happening?
Yeah.
And so but they are all related.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that just piqued. I was like, wait, there might be another. So I think that's one sort of slight different. I mean, because honestly, it sounds very similar so far in terms of like, is it just justice? And it's again, my previous, I was like, oh, is it a rebrand? And I was like, there's been one distinction so far. And then I was like, as you were saying that, there might be a second distinction, whereas I feel like there's a worldview there of that would, I think, be fundamentally different from the sort of the classic Western. Maybe this is the indigenous, why they invoke indigenousness in it. Although I don't know enough about all the various and sundry tribes and what every tribe thought about the nature of humankind. But it seems to me, in terms of some of the language you were using, that, and this is, let me just say, instead of stating it as a statement, I ask it as a question. So does restorative justice, the sort of principle, does it have as a foundational ideological element that human beings would not harm each other in like a would not harm each other, sort of, if not for extenuating circumstances or difficulties upon them. Essentially, is human nature in and of itself munificent, absent influence, absent like social influence, let's say. I'm not saying it perfectly, but hopefully you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. I don't. I've never met anybody who sort of believes that
Okay.
there's some pure conflict-free version of humanity.
Got it. Okay.
Or maybe I have, and I just so adamantly don't believe that's. I mean, I just think anybody who's really serious about this work, and we, we actually this was the. I've studied the amygdala a number of times, but this was the cutest cartoon.
I love that sentence.
Let's see if I can. Yeah, I studied it. I've included it in my workshops. I mean, we talk about it all the time right here.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I think that's like a lot of what you and I are fascinated about is human nature. And of course, part of our nature is our circuitry related to fear and threat and protection.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, no, I think, and that actually is a perfect segue into what I mentioned briefly, restorative practices.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of the idea of changing the language to restorative practices is that restorative justice and maybe even transformative justice can feel like too specific. Like, okay, it's only an intervention. Like, we're only going to come in here when we need to intervene.
Right.
And
right. Whereas it might theoretically, may or may not be practical in those actual applications. Like, that's, and I'm just holding that as a potential division. Like, it might actually, just theoretically, just the same. This is the same thing for the justice system. Maybe the very entire system of how we do justice in the United States is a useful system for something, but it might not be useful for crime. Likewise, the restorative justice system might be helpful for things that don't relate to crime, like don't relate to justice necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, that may be true. I mean, people in this work probably would advocate that in like an abolitionist sense, that it's like, oh no, it's all useless. Let's like throw it all out.
Right. Or it's like like the same way the church is a court unto itself. Like, there are, like, in the church community, you submit to laws, authorities, and literal prescriptions on how you deal with conflict. Like, if you have a conflict within church, there's not a lot in terms of how churches are supposed to run in the Bible or whatever, but there's a literal pattern that you literally have to follow. If you don't do that, then you're like, okay, well, you're literally not doing what we've all agreed to do. And it solves problems within the church, essentially, like, of anybody involved, anybody who's there. So it's sort of in many ways, it's a subset. It's a formalized subset of our justice system writ large. And so it's like, oh, this would be interesting as a secular version of that, like a secular community subset of that, which is the justice system. Because of course, this is where I feel like a lot of the tension around this term arises. I think the practices have been applied to the justice system writ large, like in terms of district attorneys' philosophies, or decriminalization of theft, for example, or whatever. And I think the reason it shocks, I would not even say just like the quote unquote the right. I think it shocks a lot of people. I think a lot of people just don't even, and I know plenty of people who voted Democrat in their entire lives who don't understand it at all. You're like, wait a second, like, and then that's like, why wouldn't theft be? No, you take from somebody, you've absolutely violated a rule. Like, you've shown that you don't care about the community, or you care about yourself more than the community, right? Which would essentially be all crime. You care about what you want more than you care about others, or more than you care about justice. For example, you've violated justice, because justice is defined as the quality of being just, fairness. Thanks a lot. Circular definition. The American Heritage Dictionary is a mediocre source, guys. I apologize. But also, number 2, the principle of moral rightness. And then 3, conformity to moral rightness in action or attitude, righteousness. Therefore, arguing for the justice of his cause, meaning it is just, it is right, it is proper, it is. So then this would be restorative properness. So basically says our community, and this is the amazing thing too, meaning it's all, I was like, I know I've seen it opposed to punitive, but it's all punitive, because it all recognizes that like truly subjective or relativist morality doesn't work. Because when anyone commits a crime, they've obviously said, I don't believe in that enough to follow it. And if you don't do it, you obviously don't really believe in it that much. So they've said, no, my right, like my moral compass is the right one. And then the community has to come around and see if they like, I want to have sex with this person, and it doesn't matter what anything anybody else says about it. So I'm going to do that. That's my moral compass says that's right to do. And then the circle obviously disagrees or whatever. So in some ways, it's already punishing because it's calling you to task for you executing your own morality properly, like justly, fair. You know what I mean? Because there's no, if it is relative, which I think some people accuse it of, and it's not true because it wouldn't even last. It wouldn't exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If not for having, it has to have a standard. And it can't just be community either, because we know community standards suck because we've watched genocides occur, right? And the whole community goes, yep, this is fine. So that you can't trust the community either. So it has to be, and I guess that's the question. In a restorative justice standpoint, what is the standard of what is just and fair? Like, how do you even bring something up? How do you even know something to be a crime in and of itself, or like a violation of justice? Like, how do you know that? Because it can't just be someone claiming it, because then you'll just have two claims. And it can't be populist, meaning everyone in the circle agrees except for this one person. So then it's just like a majoritarian. But we know that doesn't work. So then,
Well,
yeah, how do you do it?
I think the point of bringing it into practice, every
Yeah,
day, every minute practice,
yeah,
is that we can make it smaller.
yes, which
Like
would be good.
you were, I think before we hit record, you were talking about somebody bumps into somebody and spills a drink at a bar, and there's this moment where the crossroad emerges, and it's like,
Yeah,
oh my God, this is either going to escalate or evaporate. And it's funny, I did find this the most adorable.
there's the amygdala.
Like all these little cartoon amygdalas.
Yeah, fight, flight. Wait, what is it? Fight, flight, freeze. There's two
Uh,
more.
this one has it as fight, flight, freeze, threat detector. Fawn is often added to that these days.
Which one? Fawn.
Fawn,
Oh, got you to like
like,
placate.
yeah, yeah, and I can relate to that one.
Yeah.
And then people have longer definitions.
Oh, that's fascinating.
But I think so. To me, like that's our wiring. Like we're
Yeah.
gonna be triggered, we often call it, or
Yeah.
be alarmed or have a beef with somebody or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know a lot of my own personal journey is trying to do that in a more timely way. Like you and I
Yeah. Oh,
talked
that's
about
huge.
this,
Yeah.
and because when we don't, like it often can fester and get worse. And
Totally.
so I think that's the nature of restorative practices. And it's really fascinating how this stuff is showing
Yeah.
up in schools where some, I know some practitioners in schools where we could also just call it a mediator, right? Like
Sure.
it's a
Sure.
kind of mediation. Like I think
Yes.
that's one way where this new, you know, progressive new agey language like maybe doesn't serve the purpose because people they don't know what it is. And guess what? We're most often afraid of things that we don't know, and or we
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
reject them. So,
Yeah.
I think, and in some cases it is called a kind of mediation, or maybe a
Yeah.
role in a school would be to have a mediator, but really
Yeah.
what they're doing is like hosting an RJ circle.
Yeah.
And in that case, actually, I think it is okay for anybody to just name harm. I mean, but
Yeah.
it could be come out like, oh, you harmed me, or it could just, I think even slightly more healthy is just to say like, this is how I felt when that happened.
Sure.
And I think in the beauty of a circle is like this container where people can just name that, and maybe the
Yeah.
other person doesn't have to feel attacked or defensive, because I think that's often where things escalate, is like we just go back and forth, and it's like, well, you said this, and oh yeah, but you did this, and oh, but if we
Yeah.
go, that kind of goes up into the energy. But if we go down into the energy and talk about,
Hmm.
well, how did I feel and what was the impact? And I agree with you. Like I think that example of like if police are sort of gauging the impact in the moment purely based on how somebody feels when they're in all likelihood totally dysregulated and maybe traumatized, it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is
They do it in
odd.
domestic violence situations, and you're just like, I get it's part of the protocol, but sometimes you're like, this is mental. Like, this is like whatever in MMA or so. Like, you try not to. It happens sometimes, but like it's sort of viewed as negative if you like interview someone after they've been knocked out. It happens sometimes, but you're like, don't do that. They're,
Yeah.
they're literally just waking up from being knocked unconscious. Their brain's not working properly. Likewise, if you're in full on, if you're in a trauma session You know what I mean? And then you're
Yeah.
like, now, okay, well, let's get a good sense of how do you feel? You're just like,
It's just
like
like
who knows?
it's
They don't know.
unsportsmanlike.
It is. It is. You gotta. So then that way, I like the peace or mediation aspect. Now I'm a extremely. I'm trying to think though, like in some ways, I think maybe this is part of the disservice, like you were talking about, where it's the constant desire to like rename things can work against it. Where you're like having a mediator between two students, let's say, or a class that had a disruption that has occurred for throughout the history of classes. That's happened for generations and generations, and no one really was like, "This is messed up." You know what I mean? But once you call it a new thing, then you're like, "Well, wait a second. Where does that term come from? Who named it this?" And
Right.
again, it's the conservative. And again, I feel like we should have it, but like the conservative instinct, we should all have progressive and conservative, or liberal and conservative, or whatever. We should have instincts in all directions. But I think the conservative instinct comes out, especially when people again have been harmed, then or someone they love has been harmed. And they're like, wait a second, what are you gonna do? You're gonna do some new thing I've never heard of? How do I know let's say my daughter, who someone stole her backpack, if we're gonna stay at stealing, how do I know she's going to get justice? And really does like how my daughter, because then if my daughter says she feels a certain way, and then the person who stole from her said that her naming her pain causes them pain, and maybe let's say the person who stole it from them is a more emotionally quote unquote sensitive person, and they can actually experience greater subjective quote unquote harm. And then at that point, let's say if you were the person who was stolen from, or you're the dad, I'm just going to put myself, I'm the dad of the daughter who was stolen from in a school scenario, I'd be like, I don't care. I don't care really, because that's not remotely what this is about here. Now you can have that conversation, but to me that's the conversation, that's like the rehabilitation restoration conversation. And it's always that yearning for some, not punishment exactly, but just this is where it's inaccurate, for fair, whatever your concept of fairness is. But I think we have a misapprehension as human beings. My daughters do. I argue with them about it a lot. That fairness is equality,
Mm.
and that's not true. Fairness is whoever is distributing the stuff, right? If I have like 15 M&Ms, I determine what's fair. They're my freaking M&Ms. You know what I mean? And it
Mm.
doesn't mean everybody gets two. If I want to give someone four and someone else two, they're my M&Ms. Nobody else but me has any right whatsoever to determine like how I distribute my M&Ms. You know what I mean? So then we have this weird, and I mean this both as like castigative of myself and others in terms of like what fairness is. But I
Well, I
was like,
think
that's where it gets so tricky, where you're like, okay, what do you do about, oh, and this, oh, okay. Sorry, go ahead and say what you're going to say. Because I have another question, and I'll save it till later.
well, just in that example, I mean, I grew up, and I don't know if this came from my mom or if she was sort of reacting to my brother and me,
Yeah,
but um, no, like equity and fairness really meant like we divide things equally. I mean, one of the things
yeah,
what I learned, in our household, it was like, oh, there's a piece of cake. One of you is going to cut it, and the other's going to choose who
yeah,
piece.
yeah, yeah. We do that in our house too.
I'm like shocked that doesn't come up more as an example
I
in
love
when
it.
we talk about restorative practices and stuff like that, because it's
Yeah,
like, man, there's no clear example of the balance, because
yeah,
the each party is motivated to take care of themselves and each other, even if they're selfish.
yes, yeah, yeah,
Like the system is actually balanced in that moment,
yeah.
a way that probably could be applied to a lot of other things. I want to weave in one tiny last term.
Yep.
We're not going to go into it because I'm not really that familiar with it. But guess
Oh,
what?
okay.
There's yet another thing called unitive justice.
Whoa.
So
Jeez.
look it up.
That's too many. That's why we got to cycle all the way back to restorative justice. Well, yeah, but this is like again a biblical framing of what fairness is. There's this whole anecdote, there's a parable told about someone. This is essentially God and him adopting his children out of children of wrath into children of God. But it's expressed as a vineyard owner hiring workers, and he hires workers at the beginning of the day. He says, "Do you agree to this pay rate?" They say, "Yes, we're going to get whatever 10 denarii." Uh, this is paraphrasing for anybody who's like a biblical fan. They're like, it was 20 actually, or whatever. Anyway, 10 denarii, right? They agree to it. Fine. 4 hours later, the vineyard owner goes out, hires more people, and says, "Hey, do you agree to 10 denarii?" And they go, "Yes." And they go, "Cool. Okay, let's work." And they start working. Then at the last hour of the day, he goes out again. He's like, "Oh, we still need more people to finish." Hires a bunch more people, asks them, "Hey, do you agree to 10 denarii?" They go, "Yep." They all come. They all got the same rate. It was equal, right? But at the end of the day, when everyone comes collects their pay, the people who've been working 14 hours or whatever are like, wait a second, that dude here got it sundown like an hour ago. Why is he getting the same amount I did? And the person getting like, that's not fair. That's not even. You know what I mean? And then the person's like, well, what do you mean? Like it's my vineyard, it's my money. You agreed. We agreed on what we're doing. I paid you that, and then I paid this person this. Like we all just agreed. This is all what we agreed on. So it certainly wasn't. It was equal and equal all at the same time. And ultimately, whoever. So that to me is like where I get the framing for my children, where I'm like, well, no, I decide. It's my stuff. Like it's literally my stuff. You can't decide how to divide up my gift to you in a way that's fair, and I don't need to give it to you equally. Ever taking allergies, taking behavior, taking all sorts of things, because there are all sorts of reasons why people don't get equal things behaviorally. What, like for example, if you and your brother, if one of you flips the flip out when you eat sugar, because some people have a way different response. I know people who are allergic to sugar. They literally get like high. They get like psychedelic high, drunk off of it if they have like anything more than like a teaspoon in something they're eating. And it's so like at that person gets like one bite of cake. The other person gets a giant piece. Like we're all different. So we like there's so many strata upon which like equal portions is like kind of it's a fun thing to do, and maybe it's a good default, but it certainly isn't it isn't inherent to what fairness is. So I just think I always think that's fascinating.
Well, it's sort of funny because part of what you seem to be teasing out is the equity argument, like
Oh sure.
that is always pretty much made in the DEI circles, right? Is like
right. Well, because I'm wondering if it's tantamount to if it's parallel with this. Yeah,
it's parallel. It's not exactly the argument you're making.
Yep.
But then the other part of that is power. So I think, is it a person's right if it's, I don't know, their stuff, at least in the way we operate in our systems and our cultures typically, to decide that? I would say, sure, that's within their right. Is it sort of within the vision of what I would imagine like a sort of fair and equitable world would be like? Possibly not.
Yeah. It would depend on the stuff.
That's the question. And I think maybe one area this shows up so consistently is with inheritance, right?
Sure.
Where you've got clearly the parents have the power, legal power, and I would even say the right to split things up however they damn well please.
Yeah.
And how often does that tear families apart and tear siblings apart, where they're sort of arguing about what they're getting?
Right. It's that a lot of it I think comes from this false, again, one of my least, we've talked about this, one of my maybe we can do this some year, they're like the new word of the year, whatever it was, Oxford or whatever is Riz. I was always like, we should cancel at least one word every year, and the word I hate the most is deserve. I was just like, let's take like a 5-year break from anyone saying they deserve anything. And again, this is a Christian thing that like it came up a lot in Christendom, and then eventually was kind of castigated. I feel like in the past 4 or 5 years, where people are like, well, within the framework of a biblical framework, we all deserve death, punishment, and eternal destruction and separation from God. That's our central deserving. That's what we all deserve as born as children of wrath in enmity to God. What we get by grace, and grace is unmerited favor, then what we get like through Christ is adoption and unity and relationship and fairness and justice and all these things, right? So then none of us is like should be expecting any, in some ways, none of us should be expecting good treatment at all. Like and honestly, to enhance our gratitude in many ways, it's just helpful in that way. We're just like, oh my gosh, everything we get is flipping fantastic. Whether that someone has a whole piece of cake and we get one bite of cake, we're like, I just got a bite of cake. Yeah.
It's the whole lower your expectations game. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Be like, well, okay. So wait, I'm going to just get, before we start having to wind down. I think one of the I don't know too much about restorative justice. One of the criticisms I have seen is that people and I don't know if this is true or not, so tell me if it is, that restorative justice tends more than our traditional, I'm trying to think about how it's different from like just the justice system. It tends to center the perpetrator more than the victim. And is that a place where it goes poorly, or is that not even really necessarily true? Does it just highlight
Well,
the perpetrator more than the conventional justice system does.
I would hope, if it's
Yeah.
done well, that it's interesting. Part of me wants to say that the victim and perpetrator are sort of addressed equally.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's true. It really depends on what
Sure.
happened.
Yeah.
And
Let's
in
just say
many
that.
cases, as you and
Let's
I have
use
often
theft. Yeah.
talked, there's not even in some it's not always a binary. It's not always completely clear that there was just one perpetrator and just one victim. I think that's, my God, I
Sure.
mean, look at Palestine and Israel. Like it's just like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
depending
But we
on the
can use
lens you
theft.
put on it.
Yeah. Let's go back to we'll try which on theft a couple times. Let's go back to theft, right? Like someone just took someone's
Yeah, something clear like that. Yeah.
that wasn't
Now,
theirs. They knew it wasn't theirs. They took it anyway. So they
so
broke the commandment in my case. They broke thou shalt not steal.
so I'm
Whether you're
glad you
starving or anything. Go
I'm
ahead.
glad you took us back there because I don't know. I haven't seen that exact criticism, but I do
Yeah.
understand why it could exist for at least two reasons. One is perhaps it's true in some cases,
Sure.
and perhaps it's just because we are actually paying any attention whatsoever to
Right.
you
Relative.
called it rehabilitation earlier, which I think is a fine word to use that people
Yeah.
may relate to more.
Yeah.
Because we're actually paying any real attention to rehabilitation rather
Yeah.
than just locking them up and throwing away the key,
Yeah.
that it would seem like that is such a radical shift from how we tend to typically operate in the punitive system in America,
Yeah.
that it just feels so different, that it's like, oh, we're paying too much attention to the perpetrator. The
Yeah.
reason that's really important, and this may be the very core thing of restorative justice, is that if we don't actually heal
Yeah.
the reason, the underlying reason that person perpetrated that offense,
Yeah.
they're more likely to keep doing it. And it's dehumanizing
Yes.
to just evaluate them based on that action when, who knows, there may be all these other circumstances, from where they live or their community or
Yeah.
whatnot. And it doesn't mean none of this ever means that somebody shouldn't be accountable to their actions. I want to be really, really
Yes.
clear about that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of the
I think
trouble.
that's what people miss too,
Yeah.
is the accountability thing. Yeah. Yeah.
And so to me, that's the core thing. And
Yeah.
in other episodes, I talked about a thing a couple of years ago in mutual aid where, I was sort of called in under the lens or the language of restorative justice. And in my opinion, it wasn't restorative whatsoever. It was like a tribunal. And so you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
like, oh, we can't really trust communities
Oh, we
to do
know.
this.
Yeah. We know we can't. Yeah.
So I think that's true. And then what is even an aberration or a crime or a departure from, I think that's where values come in,
Yeah.
right? That's where the values of the community, and I think it's important to be pretty specific about those values. Like
Yeah.
just the naming, like love, you're like, well,
Okay.
great, I like love, but what the fuck does that mean? Like in terms
Yeah.
of like what's allowed and what's not allowed and who does what and how do
Yeah.
we, restore it and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so those are some things. And then the last thing I'll weave in to be way more like down to earth about it is the RJ community courts.
Hmm.
Um, this is a really fascinating experiment where people are bringing restorative justice into the actual legal system. It was started. A lot of this, I understand the people in Chicago are kind of basing this on Red Hook in New York to give some attribution. And yet, I think what's happening in Chicago is probably one of the more advanced experiments, because there was one neighborhood that started 5 or 6 years ago in Lawndale to actually have a restorative court, and it was very like narrow scope. It was relatively young offenders, like 18 to 22, 24, something like that, nonviolent crimes, and then, as I mentioned, two other courts opened. I happened to be living in the neighborhood of one of them, and a couple of years ago, so I started attending these circles as a community member, not as like in any
Yeah.
leadership capacity, and it was really beautiful. And so people have to opt into this. So hopefully their
Yeah.
legal people are telling them like, hey, this is an option, and you can basically sit in this circle. And we would sit in 5 or 6 circles, and this was actually on Zoom at the time because we were still kind of coming out of the pandemic and whatnot. And
Still in the pandemic.
I know, coming out of the lockdown, I'll be more specific, the Chicago lockdown.
This is why I crosstalk.
I know. No, I knew I was like gonna choose the wrong word, but I'm like,
Hey, it's your word, man. They're your words.
Brendan, do you remember when COVID?
People were freaking out and abandoning, literally people who were believed in justice threw justice out the window because of their paranoia and what the actual legal system told them what to do. Yes.
Do you remember what COVID did to us though?
uh COVID, COVID did nothing to me. I got it and nothing happened. I got antibodies.
I know. I'm just having fun.
I know, buddy.
With one of the greatest travesties of our lifetimes.
It's pretty amazing.
Uh,
So
so
yeah,
the
so they
beautiful
would
thing
sit,
about
yeah,
these circles is, I mean, it was like 2 or 3 circles of just getting to know you stuff. Really
wow, yeah, yeah,
lightweight, like if you had a superpower, what would it be? Kind of stuff.
sure, yeah,
And just sitting there and being with people and getting to know them, and then
yeah.
maybe the third circle, it'd be like, okay, let's talk about what happened. And
Oh wait, so a circle, sorry, when you said 5 or 6 circles, I thought you meant like trials, essentially, like different trials. A circle is literally just a single rotation around the circle in terms
when
of
I'm in
speaking.
this case, that's a really good. So let's say a session. Maybe that's a
Okay,
better way to put it. Like it's a
okay,
90-minute session. I'm going to call that a circle.
gotcha, okay,
And there's like several sessions or 90-minute circles
okay,
to get to. And so you sit, you get to know people, the the I think they have a better word for it, but I'll say offender.
yeah, yeah.
And then
Villain, I think villain, that's
exactly
probably what they use in that term.
the
That's what they'd
villain.
use. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Welcome, villain, to your
Welcome, villain.
circle.
It is, yeah, it's like the Wreck-It Ralph, he's like sits with all the other villains. Yeah,
So then we talk about what they did,
yeah,
and by then we've built some rapport and some trust and some
yeah.
community, and they feel like
And
a
is the
little more at
person
ease.
they did it to there as well?
No, I've never been in a circle like that, and that's next level. Like to
Okay,
me,
okay, okay.
I've never been in a circle like that or really held a circle like that.
Okay, because that's what I was saying. That if I was the person who was hurt, I would be like, the court system might be faster than this. And honestly, I don't want to sit in this forever when this, like, again, with theft. If
and
someone stole,
that's
well, they wouldn't do theft though, because theft is violent. I mean,
and
literally,
that's
it's
and that's
taking someone.
fair. I mean,
Yeah,
one of
yeah,
the
yeah.
things that I've had to really reconcile, and I do, and I've realized this in my own life too, like where I've been harmed is like, yeah, it costs energy
Oh
and
yeah.
maybe risks a lot of provocation emotionally to engage with your perpetrator.
Especially for that long, nothing to do with the whole reason you're there. Although they
Yeah,
could say, hey, no, the reason you're here is this restoration. Although it's hard because I guess unless you knew the person, then you're like, well, I don't I don't know if I want a relationship with a person who started their relationship harming, like deliberately, consciously harming me
and to me,
on
like
purpose. Yeah.
probably the best examples of that are like the Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa. Like
Yeah.
if somebody, the stories are like, oh, they forgave somebody who murdered their child. It's like I
Yeah.
can't personally imagine any greater sort of forgiveness than that.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing.
And then so that's where, I mean, a lot of this does come from. Um, so then so you sit with this person, and then what's really interesting, because they had to, now the kind of RJ purists
Yeah.
actually criticize this and say, oh, this court stuff isn't really true restorative justice. I say,
Okay.
like, well, what's the value in that? So, like, I don't know, that bothers me. I'm just like, so what if it isn't? It's still like a
Yeah. Yeah.
medical experiment.
Trying
Because what
something,
happens
man.
is we also, everybody in the community circle got to know everybody, or got to know the perpetrator. And so what we develop is what's called a repair of harm agreement,
Mm-hmm.
that where we say, oh, well, here's some things you do. And some of them might look like community service, which is typical, like, oh,
Punitive.
go
Yeah.
clean up a forest or something. But then some of them are like, oh, like one person was like, I think I want to study being a phlebotomist. And I was like, oh, I know a phlebotomist. I can introduce you. Or
Yeah.
I'm really involved with mutual aid. Maybe that's a way to get involved with your community. Or
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think coming out of it, my hope, I see it in the community, the way the community courts are structured, and my hope more generally for restorative justice. And I think the reason we do focus on the perpetrators as well as the victims is that we truly feed people. We truly feed
Mm-hmm.
the people. The general argument, as I mentioned earlier, is that these actions emerged because of some lack of support, or somebody made a bad decision, and they don't sort of judge their whole life based on that one decision. And the challenge, I think, with the punitive system is, maybe some of this is addressed in some way in courts. If you've got a good judge, for instance, you've just got like a wise judge, like, oh, great,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe they're going to do well. But the challenge in a lot of cases is what we might refer to as the, you know, like the school to prison pipeline, or where there's statistical evidence that certain kids from certain areas are more likely to commit
Yeah.
crimes and go into prison
Yeah.
so.
Well, and part because, well, this is the funny thing is like, this is the good and the bad of jury of peers or circle of peers is there are, because of the statistical prevalence, we have to at least assume a potential correlative cause of you live in a community where what you're doing that other people see as harmful is completely acceptable. Like you live in a community where your community says it's fine
Right.
to steal. Like
Right.
it's fine to steal. I know people who were literally raised that way, who their parents literally said, essentially anything you can steal and get away with is fine. They were like Russian Jews, and they were like black market in Russia is like anything you can get away with, you do. And like anything you don't, like I figure that out later, right? So she was raised like I'd never met anyone whose parents literally told them that like if you can steal, steal. Like if you can take stuff, get away. Like but I know there are communities like that, and then that there are communities where like if you the strong survive, you can rob. If you rob someone, it's just like well shouldn't have gone to that neighborhood. You're like what? You're like well essentially because that neighborhood believes in robbing. They believe robbing is fine. They believe murder is fine. Like if you don't like someone and that person mouths off to you, if you asked 12 of their peers, 11 of them be like, well, yeah, beat the shit out of that person. What do you mean? Like, that's of course what you do. So this is the fascinating thing about trying to figure out the concentric circles in a community to figure out how to. But again, it gets colonial real quick. But again, I'm not opposed to colonialism, but like we have to figure out what cultures, what communities are maladaptive to the broader communities around them.
Oh, that's well said. I think
Which is fascinating, right?
like something as benign as littering. Like
Oh, it's not
if you grew
benign.
up watching your parents throw McDonald's bags out the window,
Yeah,
you're not going to think twice about it.
you would have no.
But to
Yeah.
me, I see that in the car in front of me.
Oh,
I want to.
I
That's
get.
my road rage trigger. Like
It
what?
is. It's one of the. To me, I was like, it's one of the worst because it's like it's just it's one of the laziest. And it's like benefit. It's literally just everybody else. The rest of the world is my trash can. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, I see. And listen. People were raised that way. No,
that's what I
that's
mean.
not again. And then this is the constant thing. Is like, well, I mean, I don't think that's an excuse. The same way I don't think mental illness, like pleading insanity, I don't like up to the level of insanity, I guess. I don't think mental illness is an excuse but like there's no such thing as an excuse. You're as culpable as literally someone who's an ethics professor and knew all the information. But that's my vibe. And that's where I was like, I think I wonder how I would deal with the restorative justice circle. I think I would like it generally because I like creating relationship, creating community. And actually, again, I don't think it's very different from the justice system as we have. I think it might be sequentially different, like it's a reordering, because I think the essential intention of our justice system is that sort of restorative stuff happens in prison. And that, of course, it barely does. And then that stuff happens after prison. Like
I
post
think
prison, you get in a halfway home, and that's when you start to basically once you've made restitution. It's kind of again, I think it's probably closer. It's more akin to the biblical model, is you have to make restitution first. Once you've made restitution, like pure restitution as we can wrangle, then let's begin the rehabilitation thing. And it's the same thing in the church or whatever, that you have to be anathema until you come. All you have to in the Christian form, you don't even have to make restitution. You just literally have to apologize. You literally have to confess your fault and apologize. That's it. As a Christian, we're supposed to be radically forgiving, like a la Rwanda or whatever. So if someone kills my family and if they apologize, if they confess their crime and apologize, then literally it's incumbent upon me to forgive. And then from there, though, then you have to set about the system of restoration, because it's as much as you can say that, living that out is really difficult. So I think that's what the restorative justice format would be. I almost feel like there would be a great it's like a post punitive process, although if you had community service, because community service is obviously a punishment, is punitive. So then I don't know if you could do that in it, but I was like, I think it's coordinated. If
except
nothing
that
else, go ahead.
again, like part of what we were doing was learning what they really loved,
Yeah,
and
but
then
it's a thing.
trying to
Yeah,
kind of random rather than randomly being like, oh, here's the list of stuff the state has for community service volunteer
yes,
slots. So
yeah,
it's I hear what you're saying, and there's maybe it's a subtle gesture to kind of align these activities and not like actually have it be generative for them, actually have it be related to something what they want to do in the world, or part of the
Yeah.
community they care about, or
But
a
then
hobby
it's
they love.
yeah. And this is where people think people don't like it, because you're like, there's people who fall, and I sometimes do this with my kids, and I realize I overemphasize it, but it's the Pavlov's dog thing, where you're like, okay, well then or negative attention, right, with children. If they throw a tantrum and you come over and give them hugs and loves and kisses, then they're like, sweet. I throw a tantrum, I get hugs, loves, and kisses. I commit a crime, I get to go do stuff that I get to fulfill my dreams. I get to go do what I want. So then there's that like weird balance where you're like, well, do you want to be? And the answer is not purely no, you don't want to not benefit. I do want to ultimately benefit every villain on the planet. Like I want them to be, that's my goal for everybody. That's my goal to take it back to MAGA. That's my goal for Donald Trump, right? For the people that people hate the most, like odious people, to like apologize, change, pursue something different. That's all of our goals. So that's what I love about it. But at the same time, I was like, ooh, as if you ever were victimized, like it would be very hard to go into this sort of process, because you're like, wait a second, the person who just did this bad thing to me, like as soon as, even the theft is good enough. Like I don't care how this is me personally. I don't care how starving you are. I don't care if you come from a family of thieves. I don't care if you were literally going to die unless you're going to take something. I was like, it doesn't change the fact that you stole from that person, and you owe that person everything you took from them, including you just owe them that. And that's it. That's all I'm saying. You got to figure out a way to work for your bread that you stole. Give the bread back. And I'm not going to chop your hand off, but it's not like you're not culpable because you quote unquote don't understand. I was like, that's not how laws work. You can't relativize them to that degree. Right. Because that's another form. Well, I guess that's another form of inequity. We were like, no, well, this person gets benefit of the doubt. This person's real smart. They should have known better, And you do that with children, right? If
I
you're
feel like I
letting,
learned that in school. Like that was one of the first things they taught us in civics, was like
yeah,
ignorance that won't get you off the hook. Like
no,
it's
it
your
can't, because it can't functionally for a community to function,
right.
because not everybody has to think about it. Not everyone has the time. Is part of it, which is really sad, but that's just true. And that's why I think one of the reasons our legal system sucks. There's so much crime that you're just like, and no one has the time, or a lot of people don't even care. You just get beat. You know what I mean? That sort of thing.
Well, one of the
Um,
examples they mentioned was in Germany,
yeah,
and they were saying, I think it was like a boy who killed his grandparents.
yeah,
And here, and I would have to look up the reference and to do a
yeah,
fact
yeah.
check, but let's assume it's true.
Sure.
Um, Here, you probably get a life sentence.
Yeah.
There, he got a 5-year sentence,
Mm.
and the guards have training in psychology,
Yeah.
right? So I think it connects a little more to what you're saying, and this idea, in my experience with this repair of harm agreement, it's like
Mm-hmm.
that, even more than sitting in circle with people, which probably feels like the kind of soft, like what the hell part to some people,
Sure.
is the tangible, like this is how we're rehabilitating somebody to function differently in our society.
Yeah.
And that's the hope and dream, I think, of restorative justice.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that we can systematize that, and be with that, and be with those folks and help them heal,
Yeah. I
so
hope
that it
so.
actually reduces crime at large.
Recurrence. Yeah. And I would hope most people would at least agree with that, is like this would be helpful to incorporate. I think people would argue vehemently about where in sequence to incorporate it, I
Hmm.
guess. Because then it's like, and people would, if there was any recidivism, people would be very quick to abandon it. Like, let's say that kid killed, after killing his parents, he came out of prison and killed someone else. You'd be like, we did the wrong thing. We literally, you know what I mean? He should have. But our system is so corporatized and brutal that you're just like, I know it's very difficult for people to even like get into classes or whatever, you know what I mean? Or to get permission to get out of their thing, to go to just to
Yeah.
learn how to woodwork or whatever. So then like our system has gone so far in that direction of being like, no, it's very hard to get people to care about anything but kind of making money off of the process, that you're like, we need to install something here. I get, and then the other thing that people think people would protest is this is useful sometimes. There are plenty of people. I don't even say everyone has the tendency, but people have it's dominant and regressive depending on people's instincts. that some people do things just because they're fun and they're never going to stop doing them. Like it is super fun and it feels great to take from people. It feels great to murder people. It feels good to rape people. It feels good to commit genocide. It feels good. Like these are just pleasurable actions, in which case it would be a false apprehension that you can simply like go, oh, okay, well, if you give you different options, you're like, you'll choose this crappier option, you know, but it's almost like, it's like sobriety thinking, right? You're like, well, I like it the most when I drink. I really do.
No,
it's like, it's destroying my world, but I love it the most.
A good friend of mine who has been in justice work longer than I have, and in fact, she works a lot in prisons in Washington State for at least 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, I have on this show and generally refer to myself as an abolitionist when it comes to prisons. And yet I have to really respect my friend who says, you know what, after really being in the prisons, I'm going to say 20% of the people really do need to be separated from the rest of society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's people we can't. And I think we all have it. I mean, I don't think I am absent from that. There's something within me that has that same. I think we all have it. We all have the same compulsion to like devil. I don't care. I don't care about anybody else. And we all hopefully we do it in ways that are. And this is the weird thing. It's sort of sad in a way. This is where we like it's socialized out of us, but in some ways it's also good because if we don't socialize it out of us, then we do become all like malignant narcissists.
It's like what's that movie where like once a year?
Yeah,
like,
The Purge.
Yeah, you could just do whatever.
That's what people are afraid of, I think, with restorative justice. But again, I think a lot of that isn't restorative justice anyway. I think a lot of that is actually restorative justice misapplied. And I think what I love, I just want to big ups whatever they're doing in the community courts. I think doing it in a gradual, ground up sense is a great way to experiment with it. And I'm hoping, even though I don't know if it's like even intended to be, or even would be a replacement system, but with the coordinate elements of it, I think it's unassailable that there's something beautiful in the attempt happening here.
Well, just remember, if you don't like it, pick a different acronym.
Yeah, if you don't like it, wait 9 months and it'll be called something else. Okay, so I'm thumbs up. I was like, it's I mean, in and of itself, it certainly can't. It's justice, and that it certainly can be.
I'm a big thumbs up, and I think I hear your thumbs up. The only condition of that is like, yeah, sounds good. I'm not sure it's entirely new.
Yeah, I think it sounds pretty similar. It sounds pretty similar, but like just a different focus or a refocusing on some areas that I think could use some refocusing on, you know.
Which to the extent it's like hopefully harkening back to some indigenous practices, it's absolutely not new.
It isn't at all. I mean, again, it's super similar to I would say practices of, I mean, all people are indigenous somewhere. I think it's indigenous to the human experience of how do we, especially in community, right? We're just so far from community now is a huge big part of, maybe even a massive part of the problem. Thank you, Andy, for being in community with me.
Thank you for being in community with me. I love you.
I love you. Bye.
Bye.